10 seconds to TV.
They all jump. Because they were like, oh shit, we're going to be on TV, you know? They all behave. Still got, you know,
I'd like to call to order the Council of Governments meeting at 4:01 p.m. today on May the 2nd, 2023. If you could please join me and rise for the pledge.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes that were given to me by the clerk so that they're able to keep track of who speaks and when they speak. The clerk has asked that if you would like to speak, please give us your name, your county of residence, and your affiliation. And if it's public comment, it's limited to 3 minutes. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first item on the agenda, which is a presentation by Florida Power and Light. And I believe, Devaney, you're here somewhere. You're on, Devaney. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for coming to, well, you guys had to be here. I didn't, but I very much appreciate the invitation to be here with you all. For those who don't know me, my name is Devaney Iglesias, and I am the Local External Affairs Manager for Florida Power and Light. I'm going to let some folks that I've brought with me introduce themselves as well.
Good afternoon. Thank you as well. My name is Amy Bonilla, and I lead the customer outreach for FPL's Storm Secure Underground program.
Michael Flowers, also from the Storm Secure Underground program, and I'm responsible for all the outreach for our program on the West Coast.
So to go ahead and get started, I press first or? Nope. There we go. Okay. So I came out here today to talk to you all after what was a record hurricane season for a number of reasons. For those of you who did not know, Hurricane Ian is the 5th largest and strongest storm to have hit the United States ever. And Hurricane Nicole was the latest in a calendar year to hit the United States. So it was a record season that brought a lot of new challenges that Florida Power and Light had not seen before, flooding being primarily one of them. Following the hurricane, we received a lot of questions from you all, from your constituents regarding hardening and our efforts to strengthen the system before we head into this next hurricane season. I wanted to go ahead and share some numbers with you all. As you can see here from the 04-05 season, we took a really hard look at what our grid looked like, and we immediately went into service. So a lot of it had to do with hardening, first and foremost, our transmission system, and then looking at what it would be to harden our feeders and then our lateral lines. To explain what that is for you all, if you don't understand the power grid, I like to explain it a lot like our roadways. Transmission is coming directly from our substation, or not substations, our power plants. It's kind of like your I-75. When you get off of 75 to say 64, those are our feeder lines that run down main thoroughfares. And our laterals are once you turn off of those main thoroughfares into your neighborhoods. I mention all this because it's important to understand that when we talk about hardening, we're hardening everything. So we just finished hardening in our legacy FPL territory all of our transmission lines. There is not a single wooden transmission pole up anymore. We've moved on to our feeder lines and our neighborhood lines. So we began hardening, like I said, after the 04-05 season, given the record storms that hit in that period of time and how long it took us to restore following the storm. As you can see here, The reason we started in 2006 mainly by hardening the distribution feeders for extreme wind load. In Manatee County, that's 135 miles an hour. When designing our engineers run wind loading program and replace poles to concrete. I'm sorry, I'm gonna move. It's very hard to look at that one. I'm gonna look at here. We started, as we were hardening, we focused on the feeders because those are the ones running from the 911 centers, our EOCs, our special needs shelters, and water treatment plants. Feeders are the backbone of the system. So when we restore following a hurricane, we start at the substations. Those substations are directly off of your highways, and we follow and patrol them all the way down to each lateral. As we repair the main feeder lines, those that were being fed off of a feeder, are in design, and 10 are currently under construction. I've had the team break down by municipality for all of you as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to the team who's here to talk to you specifically about what a lot of you are getting questions on, and that is our undergrounding program, which are the neighborhood lines, the lines that are running behind your houses and the lines right off of those main thoroughfares.
Thanks, Dev. And just to kick it off, we actually have two separate programs that actually serve an undergrounding service for our customers. The one that we'll be speaking about today is our Storm Secure Underground program, which is a reliability-driven program that has the ultimate goal of undergrounding all of our laterals in our system. So what you see on the screen is actually the performance of our underground lines in comparison to our overhead lines in these two historic storms, as Dev mentioned, Hurricane Ian and Hurricane Nicole. I just want to say how proud we actually are that we had amazing data to actually tell you the benefits of our underground service. During Hurricane Nicole, you can see that our underground lines performed 15 times better. During Ian, overall, it was about 9 times better in the entire state, right? Hurricane Ian obviously devastated in the West Coast, but continued on through the rest of our territory as well. And in Southwest Florida specifically, it was about 7 times better. So the program started after Hurricane Irma impacted our state in 2017, and the majority of the data that we had about our underground performance was since then. As we continue the forensics information, we'll continue to be able to share more information about what we found. But for us, it's very important to be able to bring this benefit to customers who need it most at the time that they need it most. And to do so, we have actually received approved criteria with the Florida Public Service Commission to select projects in that order of priority. So what you see on the screen is those 3 reliability metrics that we look at in order to rank those projects. We look at these reliability metrics over a period of 10 years. And so we looked at the power line performance during previous storms, such as Hurricane Irma, Hurricane Matthew, Hurricane Michael. We looked at vegetation-related issues, and we also looked at just the reliability on a blue sky day, because if we're lucky enough, we don't have storms every single season, but when we do, we want to make sure that we also incorporate any of the reliability metrics on the regular day. So these 3 points combined are what allow us to rank those properties and select those projects. Now, I mentioned some of the initial data, especially after Hurricane Ian and Nicole, but historically we've seen a significant improvement ultimately in the better day-to-day conditions, but also on our restoration costs and the time frame. As you heard from Dev, being underground actually serves all of our customers because we are able to more quickly and appropriately address those customers that still remain overhead. So if we have a significant number of customers that are underground, that allows us to more quickly help those customers that are still overhead until we get to them and get to have their service underground. Now, our program specifically has about a 2-year life cycle for us to take the project from its inception to ultimate construction and restoration. So what you see on the screen is the typical phases that we have, and later on I'll actually explain some of the projects that we have already done and those that are already underway. In this first year, we look at the conceptual design. What is the project boundary? What are we looking at? Where are the optimal transformers that we have to place? And how do we actually design this project? Then we start initiating the contact with our customers, with the municipalities, to let them know that this is coming to your neighborhoods, to your community, so that you are also well informed when your constituents start asking questions. Once we obtain those agreements and the necessary agreements from the customers, we ultimately finish a design and transition to the permitting stage. During the permitting stage is where traditionally you see a lot more of our requests come through, because we are submitting permits to you and ultimately going into construction the following year. We send letters to our customers to ensure that they have full transparency and understanding of what the program is, what the project itself will entail, and what the status of the project is throughout the entire life cycle. For us, it's also very important that we understand and help ensure the customer that those individuals that are knocking on their door are valid FPL representatives. A few slides ago, you saw the Irby logo. They're our turnkey partner vendor in the west coast of Florida. So they will also be knocking on behalf of FPL on customers' doors. But they will be in an FPL branded uniform to be able to help that customer understand that they are well represented and actually there for proper business. Now, just to help you visualize a little bit of the before and after of what a customer may expect, I recognize this may not be every average home, but just from a visual perspective. In the before picture, you typically see the poles in the rear of a property. You also see that aerial transformer, and you see that service drop connecting to the home into the meter. I do want to point out that typically you have beautiful vegetation, right, all around your home, making it a very pleasant home to live in. But that's actually what we saw was the #1 cause for outages during Hurricane Irma. And I'm sure we'll see something similar during Ian, if there's still those overhead lines. The purpose of SSUP is to improve that service reliability, but to also make these lines and equipment accessible. So what you see on the after picture is we have removed that aerial transformer and replaced it with a pad-mounted transformer in the front of the private property. This allows us to not only minimize any type of vegetation interruptions. Right now it's grounded, it's away from trees, it's away from wind and any debris, but it also helps ensure that our crews have the proper access, minimizing any interruptions to the customer and being able to service that transformer whenever needed. Just as with the aerial transformer, we don't need a pad-mounted transformer every single home, and that's part of our initial design to try to understand the optimal location and the optimal number of transformers in a project. Additionally, you see that, of course, the service drop and that line went away. So we actually moved that to the front of the homes, and we actually place our underground cable in the right-of-way. And this is the reason why we request permits from the different cities and municipalities. Ultimately, our hope is to, of course, minimize any disruptions to that property, but if we do cause any type of interruptions or damage to the sod, to whatever was in that condition, we would restore it to make sure that it was as if we were never there. The process that we use in order to minimize that disruption is directional boring. We go to depths, as deep as about 3 to 4 feet to make sure that we avoid any type of root systems, but we also call for locates to make sure that we identify any type of other underground utilities that may be there. And with directional boring, it helps us make sure that we minimize that interruption, but also are able to minimize the construction time frame. The construction of a project is actually done in a couple phases. And so the project itself could take place from about 4 to 6 months because we do the phases throughout the entire project. So one home may not be done, in one single day. The entire project gets constructed in the same time frame. So maybe what you've actually been waiting for. So the work that has actually already taken place, the map may be hard to see, but we can definitely distribute this if you would like. We've done a significant amount of work already within the city of Bradenton between 2021 and 2022, just completed. And we converted about 385 homes, households. And we use households because one household may have 4 individuals, 5 customers, right? So this number can actually translate into a larger number of residents that have actually benefited from this reliability improvement. That was roughly about 2.6 miles that we removed of overhead. In Manatee County, between 2020 and 2021, we also converted almost just over 600 customers, households, which was about 2 miles. And then as we transition into 2024, we're very happy to share that we have already seen the selection for Manatee County of about 2,200 homes that will be converted. So you can see the continued progression and increase in work that we have within the areas. As we continue growing as a program, we want to make sure that we're bringing this reliability benefit and always taking into consideration any type of design efficiencies, construction efficiencies, to make sure that we underground customers in a timely and efficient manner as well. And just for some examples of what these homes may look like, you can see that the transformers are pad mounted and moved to the front of those properties. We restore and we try to work with the customers to find the optimal location, right? Some customers may want it on the left side of their home, maybe on the right. We'll try to make sure that it's a suitable location for them because after all, it is their home, but that it also fits the optimal design since we have to make sure we run the cable, that it's still accessible, and that it's the best location for both the customer and for us. And with that, it was a very quick overview of the program, but we're very happy to take any questions if you have any.
And before you step aside, if you wouldn't mind walking through, because again, it being a public service, a PSC-approved project, help everyone understand the process of selecting specific locations, because I know oftentimes a lot of the questions are, why are we waiting, or why aren't we moving up the list because we're experiencing outages? So can you explain what goes into selecting the household?
Sure. So it goes back really to what Deb was explaining earlier with the different portions of our distribution system. So she walked you through not only our transmission lines, our feeder lines, and ultimately our laterals. So laterals are what we actually convert underground, but the feeders are actually what we use to actually select the project. So just as she explained it, the actual feeder lines oversee the larger part of a neighborhood. So we found that after we started the program, using the selection criteria of a feeder line was actually more representative of that specific area in that specific neighborhood. So those three criteria that I explained is actually based on that feeder line, so we can actually incorporate an entire neighborhood, and we do this on a continued basis. We actually have to file this reliability information and project selection with the PSC every few years, and every single year we actually have to go back to the PSC and said, this is what we committed to, this is what we were able to construct, this is what our plan continues to be for the next year. So not only is a commitment to serve those communities that have the most reliability need, but we also have to respond to our regulators as well.
Mr. Chair.
I forgot I was the chair, I'm sorry. Are there any questions? Yes.
Yes, sir. Mayor Gene Brown, City of Bradenton. Yeah, it's on. Just a couple of comments maybe and questions. Years ago, we had heard that there would be some cost to the customer for any of the directional boring underneath. Is that the case, or is there to go underground? And then the second question is, and I'm not sure it's really related to Florida Power and Light with boring, but we've had a lot of boring in our city that seems to be getting other situations where they're either hitting lines or they're hitting water lines and different things, and we've had a lot of issues with that where it just seems like it's hard to control because it's a cost to the city, and sometimes you don't even know for a while. So I don't know if it's all Florida Power and Light, but there's some other companies out there that we're having to deal with. So can you address those two for us?
You want to take the first one?
I'll take the first one. I'll let her have the construction one. So as far as the cost, so SSUP is actually part of our storm protection plan. And due to the legislation that was passed in 2019, it actually makes it a cost recoverable program. So there is no upfront cost to the customer, meaning we don't show up to their neighborhood and say, we need X amount in order to underground your service. What it means is that there's already been a portion of their bill that has contributed to all of the hardening initiatives, like tree trimming, like pole inspections, like feeder hardening, like us. And in 2023, it's about a $3 charge per month for the average 1,000 kilowatt customer. So there's no cost for just essentially going underground. There's a cost recoverable cost for all of the hardening projects that are part of our storm protection plan.
Okay.
Now, if there is a customer that wants to go underground through our municipal conversion program, then that's completely separate and there is a cost associated with that.
Okay, thank you.
And then we work with your city staff or whoever to get locates. So if there is a problem that an FPL contractor or FPL itself has hit any kind of water lane or line, reach out to me and we will take care of that. By no means is there an expectation that a municipality would have to cover the cost for something like that if it was a mistake that was made on our end. That being said, we've seen where a lot of these plans are not, they're not located properly. That's not to say that it's happened specifically in the city. I'm talking throughout our service territory. But any specific issues that you've heard of, even if you're not sure whether or not it's FPL, you can flag it and send it to me and I can forward it to the team to see if it is one of our projects and one of our contractors, and we'll take care of it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Mayor Chappie.
Excellent. Yeah, no, just nothing but thanks for FPL. Over the last several years, I know Longboat's been going through it as well, on undergrounding our utilities in Bradenton Beach. And believe me, it was a tough challenge, especially on Bridge Street. I thought it was on. It's on. Kevin wouldn't give me the mic, you know how he is. You know. I watch the show. Yeah, I just want to thank FPL for all the work. They really work close with the communities when if and when you guys decide to do that. We made it our #1 priority about 3-4 years ago now. And so we have a very good working relationship with FPL. And with the help of Representative Robinson and Senator Boyd, it's just been a great experience for our community, and it's actually benefited the city, or the county, because we actually undergrounded everything at Coquina Bayside as part of that project, no charge.
Are there any other questions?
I do have one.
Yes.
I don't know if it's on or not. Okay. On the map that you showed, where you have done the miles, can you tell us where that is, actually? I can tell, kind of, but,
I'm waiting for it to get brought up.
right. And my question is, how do you decide what neighborhood you're going to go to next?
And are we talking about the map for feeders or for underground?
The underground.
So that's what we were talking about earlier. So a lot of that has to do with the reliability numbers that we're getting in. So our staff has the ability, thanks to our smart meter and smart grid technology, we receive all the data on whether or not there is a momentary outage, how long it lasts for, what the actual issue is. All that data is being fed back. And in order for us to select an undergrounding program, it basically gets calculated and we rate it based on most wanting to give us easements and not giving us permission to be able to even directionally bore in their properties. And we've gone into communities where an entire neighborhood has not been able to be underground because of one single neighbor. And so that's where sometimes you'll see that a process, some of your constituents might reach out and say, we heard about this project and then nothing ever came. Oftentimes, it's because of a situation like that. And so we'll have to bump them down until we can recommunicate or figure out an alternative.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
You've somewhat addressed it. The tip of the triangle in the City of Bradenton work map, that area has underground to the meter, but I guess it's the feeders that are still up on top. And I guess I'm just wondering how you calculate whether you're going to harden those versus just going underground, because I imagine everybody would prefer the underground.
Absolutely.
No, but yes.
So that section, I don't think it's going to come up, but the section that you were referencing, even though they were underground to the meter, they were still being serviced from an overhead line to the pole. So even though they may have had that minor connection, instead of having the service drop go from the aerial transformer to the home, they still were being serviced from an overhead line, which meant that they were still susceptible to actually being hit with wind, with vegetation, so they did not have the full benefits of underground. Because we looked at the reliability information from the feeder, we still were able to bring that benefit to them. So they weren't fully receiving the benefits of underground.
I believe Chair Van Ostenbridge has a question.
No, sir, you're the chair. So my question is prioritization. I've heard you talk about neighborhoods, and of course, people that live there are thrilled about that. But when we end up in these emergency situations, what our priorities become as governments is ensuring that hospitals are down for the least amount of time as possible and that they're up and running. And FPL was great with us in prioritizing how we got the county back up and running. Hospitals, schools, shelters, ALFs, as examples right off the top. So are those being prioritized in the hardening process?
So let me back up first and say that when it comes to our storm restoration, so we work by regulation by the state. We are required to work specifically with the County Emergency Operations Center and the county's emergency manager as lead. In doing so, we establish a critical infrastructure list. If you are not familiar with that list or shrinking the distance between the amount of line that is hanging, those do take priority to make sure that hospitals, 911 centers, and everything that is on those critical infrastructure lists are the first things that get powered up, which is why you'll see after a storm, when we start at the substation and we start bringing up the feeder as we patrol the entire line, everything that's being fed off that, so all your hospitals, everything that's immediately off of a feeder immediately comes back up and running following a storm if there's no damage from that service to the actual hospital itself. But those will always remain top priority for us following storm and in preparation for storm.
Okay, but as you're hardening, are those critical infrastructure points also a prioritization for the hardening process, not just in post-storm restoration?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. And then part two of that, sorry, go ahead.
If I could just add, so the majority of those emergency infrastructures like fire stations, 911 centers, and hospitals are typically fed from a feeder. So they have been already hardened due to the feeder hardening program, which is actually just coming to near its conclusion. So the way our hardening approach has been is starting with the largest structures, those transmission lines, then the feeder lines, and then the most susceptible that we have found is really the laterals. So we've really tried to harden at every single level of our distribution system so that we minimize any interruptions in all aspects of the distribution system.
Okay, and part two of my prioritization question is that the county alone, we have over $700 million in local road projects. We have massive state spending coming into Manatee County for road projects, and the city is embarking on road projects as well. All of these create opportunities for burying power lines and or hardening if we're relocating. So then when these road projects are taking place over the next 4 or 5 years, are those being prioritized as well as opportunities so that we don't redundantly come back and then harden some, a line after we've relocated it?
Yeah, we'll both have one thing to say on that. So the first thing I'll say is, as we're working with, first thing is to please make sure in any initial conversations you guys are having, make sure that you let me know so that FPL is at the table. Because oftentimes what we've seen is decisions get made and projects move along so fast, and then we get brought into the table late and we're told you have to move your lines, and there's no great alternative. And so being brought into those projects ahead of time is very critical and crucial for us. That being said, if we know that a project is taking place, a couple things get taken into account. One, the cost of relocation versus undergrounding. So if overhead feeders, if it is a brand new pole, regardless, having to pull that out of the ground, we can't reuse the pole. There's a major cost that goes with that. Bradenton Beach understands, because we went through that process with them, not realizing the age of poles when we were going in and removing them. There's a very large cost. So we work hand in hand with your staff to make sure that undergrounding is taking place at the same time. What I will say is making sure, and Town of Longboat Key and Bradenton Beach have been wonderful in the coordination, making sure that all parties are at the table having the same conversation at the same time. Because we can underground our lines, but we cannot remove poles if there are still communication lines being fed. So that's where a lot of holdup ends up happening. It has to be a complete collective effort for everyone at the same time to do it. Otherwise, there's major delays and major costs associated with it.
And I think I'll just add that we've been successful in partnering with many cities and municipalities across the state on multiple water and sewer improvement projects, road improvement projects. And as long as we have enough communication like Deb was mentioning, especially for Manatee County, if you'd like, maybe give the contact info to Deb and we can take action to make sure that we review a preliminary design plan and what your plans could be. And then that way we can at least start that collaboration and communication. We are a reliability driven program and we do have to meet the commitment to the Florida Public Service Commission. So though we may not be able to change the metrics or ranking for the entire area, as maybe we would all want, if we have an opportunity to partner and maybe work with a construction timeline, then we can try to do so within those bounds.
Okay, and our Public Works Director is here in the audience, and he hears you, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
And I had two quick questions. One, I didn't hear a timeline. You ballpark us on ballpark idea of when you think this will be complete?
You're talking overhead hardening or underground?
When are you gonna be done?
So overhead hardening is done, we had it, and I won't bother pulling up the slide. So we have overhead hardening work will be completed by 2025 with some underground transfer work bleeding into 26. And then all feeders will be completely hardened. That's not underground laterals. So
Right.
those are your main thoroughfares. The one thing that I would like to add to the previous point that you made too is making sure that we're in on those conversations early, because there are also, I'll remind you, areas of Manatee County that we do not serve. So there may be a thought that, oh, we'll just call in FPL, and then when you call us to the table, we're like, sorry, that's Peace River.
Which leads me to my last question. Does Peace River have a similar program in place?
I cannot speak to what Peace River is planning. That I can try and find a contact for you to be able to answer those questions. But I, as of right now, do not know what exactly they have planned for their hardening.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a statement to make.
Please, Commissioner Bowe.
I just wanted to say, most people that are here today do not realize that Florida Power is really a great sponsor to have. I mean, we just love having you guys. They're a sponsor this year at the Resiliency Summit that starts tomorrow in St. Petersburg. So I just wanted to say thank you, because I got to tell you, from one person over here on this side of the water, it's nice to have you guys a little bit north, especially for this. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Amy, did you want?
Of course, with us moving forward, it would start construction in 2025. The length of the SSUP will be a few decades from now, so about 2045. So we have a long way to go, and hope that we can continue coming back and maybe continuing delivering good news that we have more project selections for you guys.
Any other questions?
Sir, I would be remiss if I didn't just comment that throughout Ian, Devaney was incredibly responsive through the entire thing. We had, a text thread with all the county commissioners on it, and it was a one-way line of communication, and multiple times a day, if you called or texted her, she was responsive immediately. I mean, literally, we're in the middle of chaos, and she is always responding and answering when you reach out to her. And so I couldn't thank you enough for that during Hurricane Ian. So thank you so much for all you do for our community.
Thank you. And it goes for all of you. If you don't have my contact information, you can all text me literally at any point in time. That is what I'm here for. It's to help you all get your things done. With that being said, we just did our hurricane dry run last week. I told our folks internally that I did not need practice because I was still going through Hurricane Ian, and to make sure the practice was on the East Coast and not hitting me. But we are ready for storm season, and I encourage you all to also get ready. Make sure that you are running your generators regularly so that it's not failing when you need it most. Encourage your businesses and all of your constituents to be getting ready as well. Hurricane season has been starting earlier every year. We saw last year that it went later than it's ever gone before. The storms are getting stronger, and it's very important for us to take storm season seriously, as we saw with this last storm. So thank you all very much. Let me know if there's anything I can do for you all, and let's be ready for hurricane season.
Thank you, Devney. It's a great presentation. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a presentation on the oyster habitat restoration, and this is being given by Mr. Damon Moore. Damon?
Can you enable the content, please? I got a real nice presentation, so I'm going to wait because you guys are going to ooh and ah. There it is. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Damon Moore. I know a lot of you folks. I have about a 20-year career doing ecological enhancement work here in Manatee County. Half of that doing work for Manatee County under Charlie Hunsaker, who's back there in the back, and about another 10 years doing consulting work. So really personal projects for me. Grew up in this area, love this sort of stuff. So about 4 years ago, I gave a presentation to this group about the concept of this large-scale oyster habitat restoration in the Manatee River. This is going to serve as a kind of an update to that. But also kind of an introduction because it's not all the same folks here. And then also I'm going to tell you a little bit about the nonprofit that I've started. We just got going in January, but we're focused on doing habitat restoration work here in Manatee County. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing. Well, I covered this one, but look at the picture there. So just about the organization itself, the theme you'll see over and over again is project focused. We're not a scientific organization. I'm a restoration practitioner, not a restoration scientist. The goal is less talk about it, start doing more about it. The science is out there. There's things we know how to do. It's about moving some of this stuff towards action. I've been really lucky in my career that I've been able to do a lot of that with a lot of the projects I've been involved with in the county so far. So the kinds of things we do are like large-scale restoration. This is one of them that I was just absolutely lucky to be involved with. Was the Robinson Preserve expansion that took 8 or 9 years and millions of dollars. That the vast majority of it came from outside sources. So these are the kinds of projects. There's other opportunities to do these in some of the cities and these things. Maybe not quite at that scale, but I always say think big. Thinking a little bit smaller scale, if there's areas that you have that the only time it ever gets used is when it gets mowed. A lot of people are getting more about, what are we doing for pollinators? How can we improve this for stormwater function? I've done a lot of turf conversion projects to turn these things back into pollinator gardens, which by themselves doesn't make a big deal, but when you start stringing a bunch of them together and getting them into a corridor, you can make a real big difference. This is something else a lot of people are starting to realize the benefits of. These photos should look familiar because this is right out the door here. This is the stormwater pond right over there. This was a couple of years ago. Charlie Bishop and Elliott got on board with IFAS and said, there's things we can do to improve these ponds. What can they be? And I've always been a fan of Charlie Bishop's attitude with these. He's like, all right, then, how much is that going to cost? What do we got to do it? Let's move it to the next step. So I think a lot along those terms, too. So Charlie Hunsaker, my boss, kind of turned me loose and said, go do what you do, help those folks out. Because, they involved a lot of scientists and got a lot of, amazing information and study and everything about it. But there was a little bit of a problem on the aspects of, okay, what exactly do you need to do? How do you need to write a specification to get this done? How do you pick the plants right? All these sort of things. That's what I'm really good at. So you can see the before and after shot kind of speaks for itself. And I didn't want to just do pictures the whole time, so here's going to be one quick list, but tons of grant writing, ecological restoration. If you want to read all this, it's right in here. If there's anything that involves ecological anything or funding of that, I'm doing tons of that, and the nonprofit that I've started aims to help everybody else bring a lot more of that right here to this area. And then, of course, one of the main things that's in the name of the thing, this is a very personal project for me, is the oyster restoration. So there's a huge opportunity in the Manatee River. So for those of you who don't know, this is, there's potential by some of the studies that have been done for over 400 acres of oyster habitat restoration in the river here in Manatee County. There's a huge benefit for that for increase in water filtration and denitrification, which with everybody knowing the water quality issues we face, we need to start taking some real actions towards, improving those things. There's obviously fisheries benefits. Anybody who ever goes fishing knows that you're attracted to oyster bars because the fish are attracted to oyster bars. But the same thing goes with blue crabbing and everything. It's how ecology works. You get the structure there and things start coming to it. This is, I heard Commissioner Baugh talk about, the resiliency summit she's going to tomorrow. This, having this additional structure and hardening calms the waves. It protects the bottom from being disrupted. So there's a huge resiliency benefit on restoring these habitats in our area. And part of this too, it's part of our cultural heritage in this area. And this is something that's lost on a lot of people because this is a resource that at large scale was taken out of the Manatee River between 1875 and 1900. I have a whole nother really cool presentation that takes about an hour to give about that. I would love to do it if anybody are really interested, but there's an amazing history with oysters and harvest of oysters in our area. So a little bit of history on this is the county, when I was working there under Charlie, they initiated this kind of feasibility study. It really kind of came about when the BP oil spill happened, and as the funding started to come out for that, some of the ideas around that were kind of, what are your big picture items that you might start thinking about? So to kind of think bigger, because we knew that coming down the line there was going to be larger amounts of funding coming for it. So we looked at the idea of doing this river. And then we started looking into, some historical research on is this, is this feasible? It used to be called the Oyster River. There's severance records for all the material. So everything lined up that, we have lost a major resource before most of our grandparents were born. So we started going out into the field and doing some preliminary research to see are there oysters growing out there? What we found was very encouraging. We found, live oysters in the areas where there was hard surfaces that would support them, that told us if we reintroduce those hard surfaces that they grow on, we'd have successful oyster restoration. I'm greatly simplifying all of this stuff too, because there was a lot more than just we went out and looked and stuck our thumb up and said, yeah. But I think the really important part of that, and this started with Charlie really pressing me, and then really parlaying that over to Sherry Swanson, who's in that same position there now, is to really engage partners, because doing something at this scale is going to require a lot of partnerships, and it requires a lot of information gathering that's really hard to fund, because when you look at this a lot, it's not cheap to do, because you have to put material onto a barge and take it out there and put it in. A lot of people might look at that and be like, it looks like you're taking money and dumping it in the river. It's more to it than that, but we needed to get some high level information gathered to be able to make determinations on that and kind of prove these theories are right. So by engaging these partners early on, these are kind of the updates. A lot of things have happened in the last 4 years that you might not know about because there hasn't been a lot of project, but the background research. So through these workshops and talking to partners about the potential here, the Tampa Bay Estuary Program did a full suitability analysis for the entire river and all of Tampa Bay as well. That was a major step for us, because that took all of the factors of salinity and existing resources and everything else that you would take into consideration into deciding is this a good place to grow oysters or not. They did that, ran it through a model. Where you see blue, it's really, really good. So there is a lot of blue in the Manatee River on this. Another really important one, and I begged and begged and begged for this, is NOAA shot the topobathy LiDAR of the entire Manatee River when they did their Southern Tampa Bay project. They weren't originally planning to pick up the river, but we talked about how this project would really find that highly valuable. But basically what that is it's a very, very high detailed map of the bathymetry of the entire river that they picked all the way back up to the Fort Hammer Bridge. So that gives us what those elevations are at areas where we know where there's oysters growing so that we can start to make plans on where you can go into the future. Another really important thing for restoration practitioners, though I wish we could claim credit for this, but because this is kind of a worldwide phenomenon with 95% of the oysters around the world having been harvested, the Nature Conservancy and Society of Ecological Restoration had put out this restoration guidelines for shellfish reefs, which I'm a strong believer in all these Society of Ecological Restoration documents, but it captures everything you need to know to be able to plan a project well so that it doesn't fail. Every project that I've done when I was at Manatee County for Perico Preserve and Robinson Preserve, I followed those guidance documents to be able to put the plan together to make sure that we were doing that and spending the money that we were spending wisely. So some of the one of the really important things that I was working on and Sherry's continuing to do is that kind of pilot study just to kind of get out there and see what's going on. In 2019, I wanted direct evidence. So if we just took some material and put it out there in the river, how long does it take for oysters to start growing? So every 2 miles up and down the river, we took a commercial dish tray, we filled it up with shells that we got from Sandy, who's in the back there with START, who did the recycling program, and we put them on the bottom. So, it's gonna work. All right, so the video here is showing 14 months later what those things look like. So when it goes underwater, that tray is absolutely covered with live oysters. This wasn't even the best one. The one with the most growth was the one that we put right at the mouth of the Braden River, kind of offshore the Carlton Arms Apartments. And they were so thick on there that you couldn't really tell that it was the same tray that we used, and I didn't want you people to think I faked it. So I used this one where you can see the edge of the tray at the very end there, just to prove it was the same one. So another really important part of this, we knew permitting was going to be a challenge to do at scale like this. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services amended some of their aquaculture restoration rules to take something that's relatively simple in the long term is you take material and you put it on the bottom. That's a lot like growing oysters in the aquaculture realm. So they changed the rules to where if you were going to do oyster growing for the purpose of restoration, not for harvest, that they added that to their rules. The really good thing about that is because they have certain setbacks and everything else you have to follow, but they take care of the sovereign submerged land issues. They have a standard general permit with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they handle that. So what would normally take tens and tens of thousands of dollars for engineering and survey and wind and wave analysis and all these sorts of things, FDACS takes care of that, and a lot of that's kind of like in the guidelines they give you. They're not going to allow you to put it into places where it's going to be an issue or put these projects together in a way where it would possibly be an issue. But if you have a relatively simple, put some mulch material back into this water body, it's pretty simple. I've done one of these already. It's in process still. Right off at City of Palmetto, and I know City of Bradenton is working on one right now off of their Riverwalk area. So I talked a little bit about some of that FDACS restoration area. One of the other really good things that Sherry at the county kind of brought to the table with this is she wanted to have a GIS analysis done that showed, if we looked at the factors we know about depth and the setbacks in those FDACS permit rules, what would that look like? So here we go, we're flying, folks. Wherever you see, like at the mouth of the river, there's not much because there's a lot of seagrass. But as we start moving in, you start to see the yellow dots and stuff come in. That's areas where the setbacks are all met. and the elevations are correct, and it also matches within that suitability model. So you can see at the mouth of the Braden River, it really picks up, and then right on the other side of I-75, there's huge, huge areas that have high potential for oyster restoration in there. So next steps on this, projects-wise, there's several $1 million in that restore funding that we originally went out there for, that Charlie and Sherry are jumping through all the hoops to like bring those things to these projects finally. There's some additional state money that comes in to support this project. So there's about $2 million that's kind of set aside that's kind of already there. There's about another $2 million in grant funding that's kind of, we're waiting to hear back from, but should hear back pretty soon to start jump-starting some of these projects and get them moving forward. But you can see there, like there's the City of Braden Riverwalk, the City of Palmetto at the Palmetto Bay Preserve. They're right at their Oyster, their Oyster Dome projects. Just in from that, Sherry got another grant for another area there by the 301 bridge, and so we're I think within the next year we're gonna not just talk about how cool this will be. We'll start actually seeing some of these projects starting to go in. And there's my contact information there if anybody needs it. But yeah, for any kind of thing, if any of you guys have anything ecological, that's what we're here to do is help push those things forward. Also want to kind of get into the schools and get a lot of people involved in it. I was like a personal Envirothon champion in 1996. I really loved that being able to kind of compete and flex my academic muscle on these subjects back then. So I really want to kind of get back into the schools and get more people involved with this sort of stuff. One other thing I didn't quite get into this presentation, but I'm working on is like when I talk about, we'll go out there and restore 400 acres of oysters out there like that, no big problem, right? I mentioned it was expensive, but I didn't put numbers on that. You guys know how much building roads is. We're building roads all over the place. It's not quite as complicated as that, but we're trying to do it all off of a boat. So this thing, it comes up to about $500,000 an acre by the time you get the permitting and material down and all these other things. One of the things that ORE is working on is trying to figure out how to bring those costs down, look at some larger scale projects to get some better idea of what the scaling up would bring down for cost. But we've also got a pilot study out in the river right now to see about doing these things on wood stakes instead of the cost of moving heavy rock all over the place. We've all seen where you go up and see the mangrove roots are just caked in oysters. So to me, it should make sense, but to get the permitting agencies on board, I need to show them a little bit more proof. So we've got an early pilot study, if that's promising, and so far it has been. I'm going to scale that up and then do a full-born study and get a PhD involved with it, and then go to the permitting agencies and say, stop making us spend 10 times as much money doing this. So that's all I got for you. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for Damon?
You put your contact information back up there, or tell us what it is again. It was too quick for me.
There it is. But my phone number's never changed, so if my phone number's still in your phone, it's still good.
Thanks.
Are there any other questions? Seeing no other, thank you very much. Great presentation, very informative.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that Damon is fantastic, and we loved him at the county, and he's done great work for this community. So, thank you, sir.
Still missing.
All right, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a discussion on homeless solutions, and that would be Commissioner Van Osterbridge.
Well, the Gherkins hopefully are here. So there she is. And she requested to come up, and she and her husband both have done a tremendous amount for the homeless population in this county. And she came and spoke to our county commission and gave a brief presentation, and she asked to be able to come here to address all of us and present here. So I will turn it over to her.
All right. Thank you very much on behalf of the county commissioners, mayors, all city and commissioners and councilmen and women and the school board. Thank you for having me today and representing Hope Pathways of Manatee County Initiative. So today I just kind of wanted to talk about what this initiative is and just give you a little bit of history about it if you have not heard of it before. I am the CEO of Align Consulting, and one of the things we do are roundtables where we bring key leaders to the table to look at gaps and problems in a specific area and come up with innovative solutions. So in June of 2021, a roundtable started on the issue of homelessness in Manatee County and the poverty cycle. So key leaders came to the table. We did research. We looked at the data on hand. We looked at all of the amazing organizations that are a part of providing supportive services and services to those that are homeless. And we discovered that there's a lack of quantifiable data and some gaps. And so looking at the system, we also realized that although we had these amazing organizations and systems in place, some were working together, some were not. And so how do we coordinate that? And so we developed a model that brings everyone together for collaboration with coordination. And so the goal of this is to prevent and end homelessness and bring individuals up and out of the poverty cycle. And we do that with true wraparound care for services that have access to coordination. So with that, the mission of Hope Pathways is a collective effort of community organizations and individuals in Manatee County using calculated compassion as a process of lifting men, women, and families out of the poverty cycle. So number one, this initiative is a solution. It's not a new organization. It's a coalition. It's a coordinated effort and a collaboration of organizations engaging in a wraparound strategy to break that cycle. And the coordination is central to all partners that are involved. And that's the key, the coordination. So what makes this initiative different is we have unification with partnerships that are supportive partnerships and those that are community partnerships. So we have law enforcement, school district, city and county leaders. We also have organizations that are part of this and EMS, first responders, because all of that is important. We all play a role in how to help those get up and out of the poverty cycle. We use a digital platform. We did a lot of research and looked at, there's a lot of platforms out there. And what is accessible to healthcare, to law enforcement, to the child welfare system, to those that are in the homeless sector, the organizations, and those that are doing case work and things like that. And so Unite Us was the platform that we decided to choose and go with. It is user-friendly, and it also is safe to use across all those sectors to provide social services and connect those in need in whatever stage they're at with Unite Us. And then upholding calculated compassion. What is calculated compassion? If you haven't heard it, it was founded by our founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin. And in layman terms, it's giving a hand up, not just a handout. And so the organizations and partnerships that we have believe that very same thing. Because in order to help someone get up and out of where they are, you have to hold them accountable at the same time to make those next steps and move forward with those next steps. Not only that, the calculated compassion also is with all of the organizations and entities. We all are accountable to what we can contribute and do within our community for those in need. And so this is part of that process. And here is the calculated compassion, the full definition of it. So this is the working model right here. And starting at someone who is chronic or transitionally homeless is where we start. But HPMC, so Hope Pathways, is the central coordinator of that provides a connection between where they go, whether it's a shelter that gets put into a digital platform, the Unite Us, and then all of the supportive services and community partners and affordable housing partners work together. Because some people who are coming out of transitional homelessness are working. They just have had hard life circumstances, and they just need a pathway and a guide to get back into housing. And affordable housing is that. Now, with this, you'll see that when you have chronic and transitionally homeless, you have law enforcement, EMS, first responders, all working very hard to help our community and monitor where we can take those homeless individuals, because there are amazing programs out there in our community, and they just don't know where to go. There's no pathway for that. So it's important to have a central intake area where all can go in and you follow the same coordinated process to get those individuals into a digital platform, and then they can be monitored throughout the process, because they may go into the shelter and then they may go into affordable housing depending on what their needs are, or they may need to go to Centerstone, for example, and once they're leveled out, then they can go into a program that provides transitional housing and helping them get over their addiction. So that's an example of what the process of the solution is. And at each step, everyone that's involved in that process has access to be able to see how they've been helped and where they're going next. And they don't get lost in the system. So these are definitions. You'll hear transitionally homeless, and in short terms, that just means those who are homeless for less than a year from life-changing circumstances or other reasons. Chronically homeless is if you've been homeless for more than a year in the county that you live in, and or there's a pattern over 3 years, and it's very specific that you can read here. But in general, it's if you've been homeless for more than a year. And the Hope Pathways model, again, it's a transitional process. As you could see, it was a workflow that's transitional. When you're working through things, you need your basic needs met first before you can work on the other things. And so this is going from helping individuals go from independence and affordability with the coordination, collaboration, and accountability that we as a community provide to them as well. So our partnerships, again, it's about unity. We all work together with all of the resources we have, whether that's school district, law enforcement, first responders, city, county, and all of the organizations that are a part of our community. This is a network of organizations coming together through an initiative with teamwork. And the organizations enter and track the data so that we have quantifiable data that's reasonable to give back to our community to see how we're doing, where our gaps are, and where our needs need to shift. So these are the charter partners, the partners that we started with for a year, just to pilot this coordinated system. These are the community partners that we've also piloted, and we are growing and adding to that. So if you don't see an organization here, that's because we started small to make sure it was worked and get the tweaks out. And if you go here, we all know these things. So this, I'm not going to touch on everything because you've heard all of this, but I do want to highlight a couple of things. So the ALICE study you've heard before. In 2021, before inflation and before Hurricane Ian, there were 45% of households in Manatee County were at or below the poverty level, the Alice study. And since then, the average median income went from $77,000 to $90,000 for a family of four. That's a lot for affordable housing. So when you hear the term affordable housing, 80% of that $90,000 is considered affordable housing. So that doesn't help a lot of our workforce individuals and community members. The national average cost increase per household of basic needs for 2022 increased to by 9,100. And that's nationwide. And transitional homelessness is increasing. We all know this. We see the campgrounds, we get the calls. We have the things that are the families that are in need. Seniors, rent goes up. Where do they go? You see the lines, Salvation Army. We don't have shelters. So our current barriers: shelter space, resources to expand programs that are already working and in place, and true affordable workhouse and affordable housing. Here's some of the data that we have come across that is highlighted outside of the point in time study. The point in time study in 2022 had 594 homeless in Manatee County. As of March and April of this year, Feeding Empty Little Tummies, they work with the school district and the county directly to provide meals and backpacks for children over the weekend. They serviced 1,562 students every weekend in April. 80% of those children are homeless. Manatee County Sheriff's Office developed a program under Sheriff Wells and Captain Rick Gerken, and Joy Jewett, if you haven't, Sergeant Joy Jewett also helps run that. But they have documented since 2021, 1,083 chronically homeless individuals. And that's not in the cities, that's in the outside of the county. Foster youth aging out. You've heard this, I'm sure, from the child welfare system. We're working with them currently. Foster aging out, the numbers have went up for those that are aging out of foster care by 50%. Even Turning Points, they do a great job of providing services locally as well. And their requests for utilities and rent went up 55% just from August 21 to August 2022. And the judicial system, they see that over half of their cases cannot be closed for reunification of families because of the lack of safe and affordable housing. So you all have heard this before, but I'm just highlighting this to show you we need to do something and take some action. And we are doing that as a community. So within our partnerships, here's an example of data that we have gained through Unite Us. So 628 total cases between the organizations, just the supportive service organizations. 55% were resolved, 14% were open, and 32% were unresolved. That 32%, 1 to 2% is because the client never returned phone call, those types of things. But the 30% is because we didn't have services. No affordable housing, no shelters. The age right here can be broken down, and for our organizations, 78% of those that were serviced were between the ages of 18 and 44. 22% are between the ages of 45 and 64. We know that seniors are not represented the way they need to be in our county right here, because we see a lot of high numbers with that within other organizations. Again, this is just data pulled from those that are using Unite Us through the HPMC initiative. 60% of the cases were women, 20% were men, and 20% were undisclosed. The largest need is housing and shelter, 59%. And this is just in Manatee County, just within the organizations that are in the initiative. One thing that I want to highlight, the response time. That was one thing that we saw a huge decrease in. And all of the organizations, whether they're in our initiative or not, say the same thing. The response time for connecting their client with the resources and programs is 1 day. And if you think about that, you make a phone call, you refer someone, you wait for that phone call return, you wait for that email return. Meanwhile, you have a client or a family that is in crisis. And so this does a great job of solidifying that wraparound care that we can bring to those in need in our community. Does anyone have any questions about Hope Pathways? Yes.
First off, thank you for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Ms. Gherkin, you're spot on. You're spot on with the initiative, that collective, with all the different organizations coming together. Some of you know, but I had the opportunity to go out to Coronado Island, right outside of San Diego, where the mayor there completely eliminated homelessness. And I also got to see how homelessness was affecting the other cities in and around Southern California. And, you know, what you were saying up here was exactly what he was saying. We need a dashboard. We need shelters and beds, first off. That's the very first priority that we need here. And then we need that dashboard to where organizations can update that dashboard on a daily basis to let us know, hey, this is how many beds we have. This is how, you know, these are the different services that are available right now, and hold the organizations accountable in regards to updating that dashboard daily so we can take care of our homeless situation and get the services that they need in and around our communities. But I'm right there with you on that. Obviously, the cities can, you know, we can all come together with the county and all the different organizations and kind of take care of essentially our own, and it will all work, I think, across the board in the whole county. So thank you so much for that presentation, but you're spot on. I completely believe that. I had to do a little bit more research on my own, but that's kind of the trend that I'm seeing is having this dashboard and then working with the other organizations and ensuring that dashboard is updated on a daily basis. So thank you for a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Just a few, Chair.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you for being here, Christina, Ms. Gherkin. I've worked with you on a number of things. When you talked about felt, I actually volunteer there on Friday. I call myself a packer. So I go in a circle and pack the meals that goes out to the students in many of our schools. You said that there were 47 kids that were aging out of foster care. Can you explain to this council what that actually means? Because I don't think there's a huge understanding of once a child gets 18, they're free to go out, and or the foster parent can choose not to continue care. Can you explain that and what other initiatives are going on to try to address that? Because I know there's other organizations that are looking to build housing for children. If you could touch on that, I appreciate it.
Sure, I'll just touch on it at a high level. overview, as I don't work directly in child welfare. But from working with those that are, I will tell you that foster care aging out are just exactly that. They're children that are in the foster care system, and they age out, they turn 18. With that being said, they no longer are under the guardianship of their foster family. And so they have an option to remain in a programs that are offered through the state to get that help. But then they're on their own as well. And a lot of them there's a lot of amazing organizations in our circuit that are working very, very hard at getting that data made known to them and those programs made known to them so they can make decisions once they age out. But typically and sadly, a very, very, very high percentage of foster care aging out go into homelessness within the first 3 years.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we have another question?
I have two, actually, but I appreciate your passion, absolutely, and I thank you for your efforts. The first one is, when you talk about accountability, in addition to the other organizations, is there some element of the client's accountability? And if you could expand upon that a little bit. And then the second question is, I always say we have a very generous-hearted community. Were there any organizations that declined to participate in yours? And you don't, obviously, I wouldn't expect names, but if you could just expound a little bit about maybe their reasoning behind that, that would be appreciated.
Sure. So the first question to address that is there's absolutely accountability with the clients. The organizations that are supportive partners within HPMC, they have that accountability built into their programs already. So that is already established. That's not something, HPMC doesn't develop each program for the client. They're just the collaborator and the coordinator for those organizations that already provide those programs. And for the second one, we had a focus group with organizations when we first started looking at the model before we made an initiative. And then from there, we selected organizations that were willing to be a part of the pilot program for a year. And some organizations, because it's new, they wanted to see how it worked first. And it is a big ask to have a digital platform onboarded with all of the platforms that are already used, depending on what organization that you're in. And so that was, that was where some organizations are a part of it. And now we're open up to all organizations.
Mayor Brown, I believe you had a question.
Yes, sir. Kind of some comments and going forward, where are we going to be? Because I think there's a misconception out there that the city of Bradenton and its officials are not in support of our shelters, and obviously we have in the heart of our city Turning Points and the Salvation Army. And, kind of regress a little bit. Thank you for what you're doing. I mean, we met last week with a group of us. We've met before. We've met, obviously, with our other partners in the city. And it's not that the board, the council, myself, or anybody doesn't have a giving heart. What we need to realize and going forward is, and that's why I thought it was important after we met last week to have this here today, is that we've got to figure out the collaboration in this room. And if we don't consider, that collaboration county-wide, and some of our smaller municipalities don't have the issues because of their location maybe, but when you look at that, the majority of things that happen are in the city, and when you talk to different people, it really becomes, well, I think we need to fix it, but not in my backyard. And how are we going to come together truthfully in a community to do that? And, again, we all have our hearts that we're giving, we're doing, and we know that there's some things that we have to start working through that is accountability. I like that word that you're working through and what we can do. And, we've gone up, some of us have gone up and visited Pinellas Hope. Is that the right direction? is there other programs out there, as Commissioner Bearden said, and I would really like to see where somebody has eliminated it. And I know that you can eliminate things by policing your way out of it, doing things that are going through things. But until we really start to hit some of the key points of collaboration of all of us, I don't know that we're going to be able to start that process. And this, again, we can have this meeting and then go back to our own municipalities, counties, and that, and not work together. But what's next? I know the county has, I think, appointed Commissioner Ballard to start some things, but what's next? What's tomorrow? Not 3 months from now at another meeting. So, and again, I think what you've done is probably keep more people from being homeless than dealing with the homeless we have right now.
Right.
And, again, we're working together, we're doing some of it, but what's next and when and how fast? I don't know. But, we are all supportive of our services, but we've got to figure out where they can go next.
Right. And if I may answer or respond with that, thank you, Mayor Brown, for that as well. But with that, you have to have, in order to have policies in place to start moving things along, you have to have a place to take them. Law enforcement, EMS, first responders have to have that. And so looking for land that is not NIMBY, right? And that is usable for all entities and organizations to be able to provide that shelter is one of the solutions, and we believe as one of the first steps, so that policies can be put into place, so that we can start giving a hand up and not just a hand out to those that are homeless.
Commissioner Ballard.
Thank you. So, Ms. Gerken, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. We met a couple months ago, and it was so good to hear about the coordination that you're providing between some of these different organizations, because we do have a lot of good services in Manatee County, but the issue is duplication of services, and a lot of times people not knowing what all is out there. I think that the county is really ready to put its money where its mouth is when it comes to the issue of homelessness and when it comes to the issue of shelter. I think that we have a couple of really exciting options that'll be coming forward in the very near future. I don't know that either of those are ready for prime time quite yet, but we have a couple of very, very exciting options, and I think that everyone in this room will appreciate what we have coming forward. And it'll also be that my vision is that we have that one stop where all of the services can be found, where everyone can coordinate, and that the people can get what they need, get back on their feet, and stop relying on government services for all time.
Thank you. Commissioner Bearden.
Yes, thank you. So, with the accountability part, I think that us as a county really needs to step into that because of the money that we give out, right? With the dashboard, if we said, hey, look, listen, here's a stipulation. Before we give you this money, you got to do X, Y, Z within this dashboard. I think that we can hold people accountable across the board and say, this moving forward, this is what we're going to do. And I just think that's so important with the accountability, because if we had a system that just updates on a daily basis that tells us these things, we can definitely get what's needed out there and take care of that problem. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Commissioner Cruz.
Make sure it's on.
Well, let's not go there.
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality, and I'll go along with what the mayor said. We know City of Bradenton has a good heart, but you also have a limited amount of space, and we're trying to build up a meaningful urban core here. We've got a great opportunity with City Hall and other opportunities downtown, transitioning into Village of the Arts. Then you got the whole area around Lecom. Right now, from a former life of City of Bradenton that was focused more on the water, a lot of our services are in that area that is going to, God willing, be part of a meaningful urban core. So there's only so much you can really grow them. Otherwise, they're starting to limit the size of our future downtown and the vision that we have. So we need more, but we don't have an area to put more. Like Turning Point needs to be bigger, but there's no footprint to be bigger. Salvation Army needs 2 times, 3 times, 4 times more hotbeds. It's one of the easiest ways of helping somebody, especially from a dollar for dollar standpoint. But you can't just build out Salvation Army. You've created a permanent footprint where maybe that footprint shouldn't go. We're at a point right now where we almost need to say, okay, let's step back and say, City of Bradenton, City of Palmetto, Manatee County, collectively wants to work on this problem long-term. We want to look at the growth of what services we're going to need long-term. Is where those services are right now the best place for those services to grow them in the manner in which we need to grow them? Before you start saying, here's a piece of land, let's throw some tents on it, and then let's add some hotbeds here, and we have a hodgepodge of services spread around what ultimately is an urban core. You know, we need to maybe take a step back and say, is there a better place for this we can grow it more meaningfully today before we grow these all independently to a point where we can't do anything about it anymore? And I used the example earlier when I was talking to somebody about this. I'm not saying this building, it's occupied, but just for an example, you've got the building where right now the sheriff and supervisor election is. I'm not saying that building, I'm using it as an example. It's ideally, if it was empty, a perfect location. You could put Turning Points in there, you could put Salvation Army in there, you could put other wraparound services in there. It's next to one of our main transit hubs that gets people up and down the 99 route, so people don't have to just hover in front of it all day long, because let's be honest, Turning Points, once you get off the bus in downtown or down in DeSoto and walk all the way to Turning Points, you're not leaving for the rest of the day. You've made your way there. If you have transit right in front of it, you can go out and work or go do something else. We talked earlier, like part of the problem with people going out and finding jobs or risking getting arrested is they all have their stuff. They've got their belongings. They have no place to put those belongings. That's honestly their number one fear of being arrested. It isn't being put in jail and getting a free meal and free health care. It's losing their stuff. So having a place where maybe you can have lockers or safe storage for something like that so someone can go get a job and make a few dollars without risking somebody taking their stuff is important. Finding a place we can consolidate these services in a growing manner and put 20, 30, 40 hotbeds for Salvation Army and grow Turning Points and have a place where someone can sleep in one place and get their services in another and get their resume worked on another, all in a central location near transit, is something we need to look at today. Instead of just throwing a few bucks at one and throwing a few bucks at another, and they're all a few blocks apart from each other where they probably shouldn't be in the direction the county's going and the city's going, that's where we need to look first and foremost is let's find a place, whether it's a vacant piece of land or it's an existing building near transit, and then figure out what do we need to put in that space, what money needs to be allocated to it, and do it. I think that's the first step.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Ballard?
And Commissioner Cruz, I think that is exactly the kind of solution that I'm talking about right now. So hopefully we can all get on the same page and all learn about it sooner rather than later.
Right.
Are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Baugh.
Sitting here listening to my colleagues, they're spot on. And they're new, and they've already got a grasp of what the needs are. And I think Commissioner Cruz was very eloquent in how he was saying we need to figure out where these locations are. I mean, we've talked about today, some transitional housing and operations that I think you're going to see. We've also already approved $15 million for veterans housing, permanent housing, which will also include services. So I think the county's done a lot, but I think Commissioner Cruz hit it right on the nose. We have to figure out the best places for the county as a whole where these properties need to be. I mean, in our meeting the other day, we picked out a a spot for veterans housing, which was, I don't know that it's really the most perfect solution. I don't know until we can all sit back as a county, and when I say as a county, I mean all the cities involved, and make an intelligent decision on where we want all of this to be. And I think if we look at the county today, we get a good idea maybe where it needs to be. Turning Points has been a fantastic partner, and to me, they're the top every year, but they're maxed. There's nowhere for them to grow right now. So we need to figure out a place to have transitional housing, but also be able to have Turning Points right there, and the other organizations that can help in that regard right there with them. So this is a conversation that maybe we're just starting today, but I think the school board needs to be involved in this. How many students do we have that are homeless today? It was 2,000. Has it gone up or gone down, or is it about the same?
I haven't gotten that.
It's about the same. It's
Thank you.
2,000.
Thank you. So, obviously, it's all of us that are involved. It's Palmetto, the city of Bradenton. It's all of us. School, of course. So this is a conversation for everybody sitting around this table right now. It's not, the county can't do it by themselves, and neither can any of you. It's going to take all of us working together to be able to accomplish this. I think the county, and I'm not going to get into some programs that I know my colleague has worked very hard on, and she's going to be bringing it forward, and I'm very excited to hear about it. But I would say probably right now we're probably at 12 million easily with what the county itself is looking at it, trying to accomplish for homelessness. So I think it's a good conversation that we're having. And I think, as the senior commissioner on this board, which I'm sorry to say, because yes, I am, but that being said, I've heard this conversation every single year for almost 12 years. Let's get it done. Again, all of you are going to have to decide, are you going to be a part of this? Are you going to help with this? If so, let's all get it done and start today. If not, if we can't get it done today, which we can't, let's schedule another meeting to take it to the next step. This is something we're going to have to meet regularly to get and put together and have it solidified. So let's do it. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Brown?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow that up, and I think it's been some great comments by everybody. And again, I want to thank Christina and her husband, Captain Gherkin, of what they've done so far and how we push it. So, and I agree with Commissioner Ball, okay, what's next? So we could sit there and say it, but then we all go our separate ways. When are we going to meet? What's the next step? Do we maybe move up one of these meetings to the next month so we can maybe have some as their timing? I mean, we can wait till August 1st, but that doesn't do us any good. So what can we do? And I mean, I know the chairman of the county commission has all of us have hearts for this. But when can we do that next meeting to maybe keep this going?
So I think the city and the county are the two biggest stakeholders here, and we keep saying we're going to have a council commission meeting, and we haven't been doing it. Why don't we agree to try to get something on the schedule before recess, to sit down with them to
Great
talk
idea.
about this, City Hall, transit, right, some even comp plan, right, as we're moving forward with that. Sorry to break off into a county commission meeting, but we're here. It's publicly advertised. Yes, sir.
Can we go ahead and make a commitment that we can locate some properties in the meantime and then bring that back up in the next month?
For sure. When we sit down with city council, I think we should have our ducks in a row and say, here's some potential sites, here's somewhat of a budget, like an idea of what we want to do with it. Ballard's left, but my understanding is she's most of the way there.
Yeah.
I don't have her details, but that's what staff is saying.
So if it's all right, Commissioner Van Ostenbridge, maybe you and I can sit down and really find a date. It's going to be hard to get that date because we have to approve it and all of that. But before your break, I would really like to see if there's a date we can come up with something. And I know we did last time an afternoon and kind of ran out of time. I don't know that we can plan a whole day, but I'd like to really sit down.
I think we can get a half a day in there.
Right.
Q, let's sit down, let's talk tomorrow.
And can
about a
we
date.
have just out of curiosity, can the school administration, the school board be involved in this as well? this
Definitely.
meeting?
Absolutely.
They play a big part.
Okay.
Yeah, And that would just go to the homeless students.
Of course.
You know, we need to identify the region that they're at, and I'm sure you have that data. And then I'm more than happy to sit at the table.
Yeah, because we probably either need two separate sites, one for adults and another one for families, or somehow there has to be some kind of division on
Right.
site between the two.
Exactly.
So,
Great.
okay.
Thank you.
I'll get with Q tomorrow. We'll reach out.
Good job.
Any other questions or comments? On this issue? Then we'll move on then. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Very thought-provoking. Next on the agenda is a discussion between school board and the Board of County Commissioners on how to collaborate on future developments, which seemed like a timely discussion. Chad, I believe you're up, so.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, that was not planned, but but that's good. I'll reiterate what Ms. Spray said. I think that the school board will absolutely sit and please include us in the email when you do that, because the topic that was up for discussion and really came through a board workshop that we were having is we're looking through our 5-year plan of obviously the growth that's happening in the county. Where are we putting our new schools, right? And so we've got 5 new schools, 2 elementaries, 1 middle, 1 K through 8, 1 high school. So 5 schools in the next 3 to 5 years that we've got to build. And as we were discussing some of our capital plans, it came up in the board meeting with some of the new, especially some of the new members of what is our collaboration. When I say ours, our staff, Mr. Penley, and when we look at our growth and the county's staff, and when we look at it, what, how we're approving developments and land use and that sort of thing, what is our collaboration between the staffs, and then what's our collaboration between the county commission and then ourselves as a school board? And so I've got some I'll give it to for record and have it out, the map that we have where our 5 new schools will be going. But we just want to make sure we have an open line. I think it's great that I'm with Mayor Brown. We sometimes talk about this and it never really gets done. And we are absolutely at the school board. We'd love to be involved in everything we possibly can be and help wherever we possibly can. And so I think as we grow and we move forward, we just wanted to make sure that there was a communication opened, that we would love to be able to make sure we collaborate. The homeless, and that's obviously one, but moving forward for when we need to build schools, a lot of this stuff is of course done by developments, and the developer typically on all of our projects is typically the one who's going to provide the roadways and utilities, et cetera, inside the development. But there are things like the firing range, the new drive, the new range that we've done with the city, and that the Manatee Sheriff's is going to be on. The opening is Thursday at 9 o'clock if you want to head out there for that. But things like that, we need to be able to collaborate with the county, make sure utilities are run and things like that. So we just wanted to open up that dialogue, make sure it was there. And of course, going to the homelessness and the concern there. We're all about, wanting to get to the table and collaborate and figure out solutions, and how best we can help from a school district standpoint, how best we can help everyone in the community. So that's really all the topic that I had, was just to present this and make sure this goes into record. I'll take any questions or we have any other things to discuss, but we definitely want to be on board to help with the homelessness and that solution.
Commissioner Van Osterbridge.
Do you have like an actual ask? Are you wanting to have a regular meeting set? And if you do, are you wanting to like have a commissioner and a board member on it? Are you just wanting administrators, or are you even asking for that?
I think at this point it was making sure our staffs work together first,
Okay.
As we move forward. But as of right now, we're where the new developments are going and where we know they're going, we're pretty much on board. We pretty much have that. But as far as future goes, just as long as our staffs are working together, and these meetings are great, but there's also a lot of stakeholders, there's also a lot of people here that aren't necessarily in that department to make those changes and make those decisions. So, it is hard to get us all on one schedule. So I'm not specifically asking for a meeting
It is,
right now,
but things
but just
do
making sure
happen.
we
I
have.
mean, Commissioner Satcher, when he got elected, he scrambled to get sidewalks on Erie, I mean, as fast as he could, because it was a serious situation.
It was an issue.
And then even when he started to, he got the great news that, oh, well, actually, we only really own as a county like 6 inches off of the pavement here. This is all FPL property. And, Deb, she wants
Deb.
top dollar. Yeah, I don't know if you ever sat down and tried to negotiate with her, but it's like being at a flea market, But anyway, so we do run into these, and he had multiple schools going in on the same
Yeah,
road.
yeah.
So we do run into these problems. So I didn't know if you wanted to include, if you wanted to set something, maybe we need to hear from Commissioner Satcher, I feel like.
No, we can definitely set something to where we sit down and talk about, possibility, especially what you all are hearing, what's in the pipeline,
Yeah.
who's applying for certain things.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Right.
We didn't have an idea to say, let's do it in 5 months, 4 months, 3 months, but we would definitely love to sit down.
Yeah, and not every
In both of
county needs these, all these agencies to have to, start sitting down together, but we are one of the fastest growing places in the
Right.
entire country. So we're gonna have to adapt and start communicating better to deal with growing pains.
I believe Cindy, would you like to add?
I'm just going to tell on what Chair Choate said. I went out to see a potential site out east, and I hadn't been out there in a long time, and I'm amazed at the growth that's going on out there. I think we're predicting to add 1,200 more students for the 23-24 school year, I believe. I think that's under-projected. I think there's going to be a lot more. I was at an event Sunday and spoke to some people that had moved down from Pennsylvania to Lakewood Ranch. They love the area. They're talking to all their friends and their buddies. Come down, schools are great, the area's great, bring the whole family down. So I think what we are looking is for future development. If you have a project that's coming before you, we would like to have not a seat at the table, but an ear, so we can see. I watch your county commissions as often as I can, but I can't commit to watching them all. The planning, maybe somebody should be at the planning meetings all the time and see, for future developments, and then see how we can project, okay, we need to go talk to that developer or whoever owns the property out east or wherever we're going to need a school, and be able to have that conversation now. And I know that 20 years ago, somebody had a conversation with somebody because we're going to need a school out there. Parish community is an example. And to speak of parish community, we're adding on to schools left and right. We're moving portables. You would not believe the money we spend just by moving portables because of the growth that we're having. So I think what our ask would be is just to be able to have an ear at the table when something's coming down the pipeline, that maybe there should be a collaborative meeting with the county and or city that we can know how to plan.
Thank you. Commissioner Vaughn.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk real loud because I don't have a microphone.
We'll give you one.
I think what I'm hearing here, it's obvious to me in looking at the growth that we are witnessing. It's not going to stop. It's going to continue. We know that. I was at a meeting not long ago at our EOC, and we had some federal and state agencies there, and we were talking about Ian and down in Fort Myers and Fort Myers Beach and everything that transpired with the hurricane, and Sarasota at the time. They had a lot of damage. And the one thing that stood out the most I'm hearing right now in this room, and that is that your federal agencies do not communicate.
No.
They don't have a clue what the other agency's doing. The state, they do a little bit better, but the communication is very weak. So I think what I'm hearing is that it's obvious to me that this organization, the COG meetings, we need to start having more of them. The whole time I've been on the board, and John Chappie can tell you, half the time we would cancel the COG meetings because we didn't have anything on the agenda for them. I mean, Lee, you remember that. Now we're sitting back and we have a lot of issues and we have to coordinate them together. So I would suggest for the leaders in this room that, you schedule more COG meetings. Let's get together more often and communicate on what the needs are for the schools, for the county as a whole, for the cities. I mean, we're all in this together, obviously. It's not just homelessness. It's the whole shebang. So we've got to meet more and make decisions and have these conversations that we're having today. In the meantime, I do think it's a great idea, Chairman Choke, for you to meet with our chairman and with the other chairs. Mayor Brown, no, I know he's here somewhere.
out in the hall.
So, I think it's important for the leaders in our different organizations to be meeting regularly as well. You don't come under sunshine really together, so you can have those conversations. Mary Ann, I didn't even see her sitting there until just now. So, hey, so it is important that we get better communication. That is the only way that the schools are going to be able to communicate with all of us what their needs are and vice versa. So it's obvious that is where the weak link is communication. So good luck, guys.
Thank you.
That's it.
Commissioner Satcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you bringing this up and in this meeting and the support. As you look at the county and where the growth is really happening, I saw a number that 95% of the population growth was in, what was the number? Was outside, what was it?
District 5.
It wasn't District 5. It was mostly District 1. I think it was outside of, I won't call the city, but I think it was outside of Bradenton where it had been. But regardless, this is a wonderful place to be, amazing opportunity moving forward. But I think we all recognize some of the decisions we're making now, generations after us are going to have to live with. And so if it takes, some work and to sit down and go over what can happen, I know when you've got these just constricted schools and then you end up with the overcrowding, I think we need to help. The county, I want us to be able to help. I love it when I see a school and a park side by side. And so we need to be looking at the new developments out east, as you go east of Rye or 675, and if you go north into North River and seeing what we can do to make things like that happen in the future. We're looking at our comp plan right now, and I feel like, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So I'm hoping we can put some real incentives for people that, for investors and business partners that are building to end up with the schools, in a better position and the park system in a better position for the families that are gonna move here, because it is what it is. It's just beautiful here. It's wonderful to live here, and people are figuring it out. So, I'm looking at that and want to bring that forward to the county commission moving forward. I hope that maybe the schools could look into something that would do the same thing moving forward. So I want to take a look at your map that you brought, and then I'll probably just go ahead and put it maybe on commissioner comments in a future meeting. We'll talk about how we want to do it, because I appreciate what you said earlier. You mentioned me, Commissioner Bob mentioned you. I don't care, as long as we've got a great plan going forward, it'd be great. So thank you so much for bringing it up, and we want to be a good partner, and I know that the businesses and families and community here does as well.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments and/or questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment. And I should preface the public comment by, we'd ask you to please state your name, and then if you would, please, you are limited to 3 minutes. Go ahead, please, and we have public comment number 1.
Mike Meehan, Manatee County resident. I'm very gratified to hear the commissioners and the city officials talk about actually trying to find a piece of land for the homeless and then coming together as soon as possible after that to come up with a plan to proceed. I specifically would like to talk about the 4 visits I've made up to Pinellas County in the last 4 months. Homeless Empowerment Project and Pinellas Hope were the 2 sites that I visited. And I have some observations about those operations and why they, I think, would be a good model for the county to pursue. The first thing about both of these projects up there is they put a premium on personal connection, interaction, and compassion for the people that they're dealing with. I think that's one reason why they've been in business and been successful for, one of them's been around 20 or 30 years, and Pinellas Hope's been around for about 16 years. But the personal compassion interaction plays a really big role in the success of the programs that I've seen up in Pinellas. I also think that a private organization with public and private support is the best way to go. Those two models are privately run, but they have a lot of public support and they have a lot of private support. At Pinellas Hope, you can sponsor a container for 3 homeless people for about $15,000, and they'll put your name on the side of the container. So there's a lot of personal support, private support for these institutions. It should be a soup to nuts operation, as Ms. Gherkin pointed out. It should all be in a single location, and it takes care of the meals, the caseworkers, the job search, the ID cards, laundry, showers, clothing, and of course, safe overnight accommodations. That's what these two organizations up in Pinellas bring. Finally, I think there should be an incentive within these programs to encourage people to move from one step to the next step to the next step. And what I saw at Pinellas Hope is you're first in a tent. You're in a 10 by 10 foot Coleman tent on a raised bed, and that's where you are. But then you get a job, and they move you to the private containers, which contain a cot, a door with a lock on it, a window, and an air conditioner. So you kind of moved up the food chain. You go to work, and you pay $50 a week to live in one of these containers. And then the final part is at the back of the facility, they've got about 200 studio apartments. So when you graduate from Pinellas Hope after 90 days, you can move in to permanent studio housing and resume a normal lifestyle. So I think those are excellent models to follow, and I'd encourage everybody here to think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there any other public comment? Yes, ma'am. If you would, please, your name and your county affiliate,
Yes.
county of residence.
Yes, my name is Kelly French. I live in Manatee County, and I work for the Salvation Army here in Manatee County. First, I want to start by thanking all of you for this dialogue on the homeless situation, and I thought I would just throw in a couple of little facts for you. Our current shelter can hold about 163 men, women, and children. A majority of that is for men, with only about 50 beds designated for women and children. That is our greatest need right now. We are having more and more women and children coming in seeking shelters. We're at capacity, and we have to turn people away on a daily basis. While I really believe we need a good, solid, long-term plan for growth, we also need to look at short-term situations so that these women aren't sleeping on the street every night. It's much more dangerous for a woman and their children to be on the street. So we really need to find a Band-Aid while we're looking at the big picture. One of the other obstacles that we're facing is the affordable housing. As places get more and more expensive, more people are seeking shelter, but it's also hard to move more people out of shelter. And when I say affordable housing, we really need to think about housing for people who have disabilities and are on a fixed income, as well as those who work in the service industry. Some of what is being considered as affordable housing is not really affordable for our clients who sometimes have an eviction on their record, which makes it 10 times harder for them to find housing. So as we meet on those, I invite all of you to come and tour our facilities and learn more about some of the barriers that our clients face. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Yes.
Keith Green, 1108 60th Avenue West.
As a former leasing consultant, one thing I would like to say that, affordable housing is a wonderful thing to consider, but why stop there? We should also consider the possibility of having financial literacy classes, which helps people get into the path of home ownership, because at the end of the day, when you have these types of things out there, this teaches people how to watch their credit scores, how to maintain a good credit score, how to possibly fill out an application to get a mortgage. Because at the end of the day, affordable housing is a great thing, but what I'm thinking is long-term, you're continuously putting money into the pot of something that eventually you yourself will not own. So why don't we also focus on those types of things as well, too, that helps persons that are young professionals and in the underserved communities that can get to the path of home ownership. So that way, this is something that can be passed down from one descendant to the next, to where that also covers the areas of homelessness, that covers the area of, just making sure that, people are taken care of in this community.
Thank you, Mr. Green.
Hello, everyone. Kathleen Kramer, Manatee County resident and Executive Director at Turning Points. I have two quick comments. One is that we always have to remember that less than 20% of people experiencing homelessness in Manatee County are chronically homeless. 80% of people can be resolved with affordable housing and some of those supportive services, those tools to help them learn some of the tools to be able to sustain. So it's really important that we remember that when we're doing planning around homelessness, that we're looking at both not only chronically homeless, but also those individuals, the other 80%. And so the press, have been really excited and impressed that the city and the county have nearly 2,000 new units coming for affordable housing. We have to keep the press on because the need is 11,000 units when we're talking about workplace housing as well, workforce housing. And so keeping that press on is so critical. And again, I'm also really excited to hear you all sitting here talking about coming together, having conversations around homelessness and people experiencing homelessness, because that's the only way forward, is all of us together. And when I say all of us, I also mean the agencies. And so that's my one request to you, is that when you have these meetings, that at some point, agencies doing the services are brought in and allowed to have frank and honest conversation about what they think of the plan that you're creating, what they think is going to work, what they think the barriers are. It's very challenging to do that from 3 minutes over here. It needs to be at the table, truly having open, honest conversation about, what our concerns are, what we're supporting, what we have challenges with, so that we can come to the right plan together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move on to other comments by officials. Do we have any other officials here who would care to make comments? Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jane.
I mean, there have been such great discussions and really important issues. I almost hesitate to bring this up. May sound trivial, but one of the challenges, and I just don't have the opportunity to have all of the county here, is that the whole sign ordinance and with our code enforcement, I'd like to see us try to work on in the ordinance that we kind of have the same ordinance, because the flags and everything are really detracting from the appearance, and the islands, y'all have to drive through it all. So, and half the time when we call code enforcement, oh, that's the county, and they have different rules than the city has. So if there's any way to coordinate our sign ordinances and help with code enforcement, I'd like to bring that up at some point.
Thank you very much. Are there any other comments, questions? Yes, ma'am.
This is just really a recognition. She's sitting quietly over there, but the Manatee County Schools Superintendent, I believe this is going to be your last Council of Government meeting, and just wanted to recognize you.
Did you have anything to say, Ms. Saunders? Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, our next meeting is August 1st of this year. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.